Alright, so we got General Order number 4. If contact was made with hitherto undiscovered intelligent life forms, under no circumstances shall Starfleet personnel, either by word or deed, inform said life forms that worlds other than their own, or intelligent life forms other than their own, exist outside the confines of their own space. Now we think about that for a minute. As I put that there. Their prime directive, General Order 1, says, no Starfleet personnel may interfere with the normal and healthy development of alien life and culture. So, looking at our own Earth history, you don't have to go very far back in our own modern history to see what sort of effects might occur to a society that's unprepared to acknowledge that they are not the center of the universe, that there are intelligent life out in space, and not only are they there, but they're capable of coming to them, or coming here. So in the 1930s, when H.G. Wells' famous radio broadcast War of the Worlds, there were certain elements of the Northeast in upstate New York and in the backwoods of Massachusetts and so on and so forth, especially after all the negative effects of World War I. People were highly conscious of the possibility that another war could be in the brewing, because things in Europe were ugly and growing worse. You know, the Nazis had not quite come to power yet, but they were working on it. The movies of the day, the entertainment of the day, were talking about aliens from Mars and from the outer reaches coming in and messing with humanity. So when this very realistically seeming docudrama kind of thing takes place on the radio, quite a few people become concerned, and even larger, I should say, a large segment of the regional population became concerned about it, and a smaller percentage actually became actively terrified of the idea that we were being invaded. So much so that there was some panic in the streets. There were people vacating the cities for the countryside, and there were armed groups of, the lack of a better term, rednecks and well-determined city folk running around the backwoods looking for these aliens, as if somehow or another a handful of shotguns and hunting rifles would stand a chance against a 90-foot walking attack craft armed with death rays and shielded. But the point was that a lot of people took that seriously, and they panicked. So throughout the 50s and 60s, we have a lot of this UFO hysteria and UFO craze, where lots of people believe they've seen UFOs. Some people believe they've been abducted by UFOs. The other elements believe that our government is hiding UFOs, or at least evidence of extraterrestrial life. And our government is not quite positive how we would react if there really were little gray men in contact with the government. Now, in fairness to our government, start with, our government comes in two layers, if you really want to look at it. The United States has a duly elected set of officials who are supposed to represent and or lead the country, but they're elected. Behind them is this faceless and sometimes semi-faceless bureaucracy that are not elected. These are people, whether they be in the military or be in civilian government, who for more or less purposes are in it for a career. And they don't care which political body's in power. To some degree. They're going to do their job, and in some aspects there's going to be elements of that job that require not telling those elected what's going on behind the scenes, because those people who are elected are not always going to be re-elected. Now, there's a handful of senators and congressmen who are long term. Well, you talk about it's rare. It's not and unheard of, but it's kind of rare for somebody to have 40 or 50 years in public office, but it does occur. And the rest are going to be short to midterm. 4 years, 6 years, 12 years, something along that nature, and then they're going to get elected out, or they're going to decide not to run. You can't, if you're running the show and you're running very highly sensitive projects and or programs for the benefit of the United States as a country, the government, and the people, you can't necessarily share that information with part-time temps. For all intents and purposes, call them what they are. These are temporary government officials. So the permanent government officials are going to keep some things under the hat. And if you do a little background on the top secret, levels of top secret, you know, a lot of people say, well, I got top secret clearance, but what level? There's multitudes of levels. And surprisingly enough, the president is not the top of the peak. There's 8 or 10 levels of secrecy above the president's pay grade that the president's isn't entitled to know about, and for good reason. Not always a healthy reason, perhaps, but there's solid reasons for it. So, if you are bebopping through the galaxy and you come across a planet full of fairly well-developed primitives, you know, they could be even atomic level where they're just reaching out to the local bodies in their own solar system. They're on the verge of nuclear holocaust or some biological genocide and are just barely hanging on. A outside entity comes in and disrupts the entire balance of things. And this can have a bad effect. And in the original TV series, in a number of episodes in the second Next Generation and here and there, we see the effects of what that sort of stuff is. There's a planet where a Federation or a Federation of Earth or whatever ship before the Federation occurs, United Earth or whatever ship visits and inadvertently leaves behind a book, so a number of technical manuals, but one is basically a historical book on the history of the mob, in the Chicago mob. And so when Kirk and the Enterprise come back to check up on the advancements of the planet, they're utterly shocked to discover that the planet has adapted, the culture has adapted 1930s Chicago as the way to do, what to do and how to do things. Let alone, you know, impressed that they have a subspace radio and the ability to detect a ship in orbit and things like this because they learned from those technical manuals that were left behind. So their entire government and their entire social and development progress has been affected by, unintentionally, by the aliens. So they have to go back and try to fix things to some degree. Kirk basically uses what he knows about the 1930s Chicago Earth Mafia and demands a tribute, and that now introduces the mythical feds, which would be knowledgeable enough to the locals to equate that with a federal government, but in the real world it would have been United States government, not the state of Illinois government anyway. So having General Order 4 makes perfectly good sense, and in conjunction with General Order 1. And the argument could be made, well, you've already covered it in the Prime Directive, why have a second one? I think General Order 4 reinforces the Prime Directive. It makes General Order number 1 even more potent because it backs it up. It's specific in this case where it says, you shall under no circumstances by word or deed inform said life forms. So when we see episodes in The Next Generation where the crew are dressed up and in some degree even using medical treatments or procedures to alter their physical appearance in order for them to blend in with the natives, and have taken great pains to try to understand the basic native customs and social interactions in order for them to observe closely. So they aliens among us kind of thing. So they go down and they investigate. There's another episode where Starfleet has actually built a number of blinds that allow scientists to study a culture without the culture being aware that they're being studied. And it's by dumb accident, and I forget exactly how, the holographic projector or whatever it was that was hiding the research institute is disabled or brought down, revealing the Federation observers to the locals. And I don't think it went too bad, but the fact is that we could see a number of issues cropping up. But this is purely a Star Trek Federation philosophy. I read up stuff enough on the Klingons to know that the Klingons don't care about that sort of thing. They don't care if you know that there's an alien force out there much more capable than you are. They show up and they take on the Big Brother mindset to some degree, with this kind of smarmy, we're here to help you become better at being a servant to us. So we'll help improve your economy, we'll help improve your technology, we'll provide you with things your planet desperately may need, or fix issues as long as it's cost effective for our purposes. And in some cases they just outright enslave the population. So you imagine the difference there being is that a Klingon Imperial ship shows up and pretty much dictates to an alien race that everything you've ever known is wrong and we're your new god. And it happens. So the Romulans would probably do much more in the way of controlling things behind the scenes. The Romulans would keep a low footprint, control the elite people of a culture to get what they want, use skullduggery and trickery and espionage whenever necessary, and save brute force for the inevitable if there's no other option kind of thing. So I can imagine these various worlds that are not quite spaceflight capable being manipulated by various space-based entities. And in this aspect, there's an argument can be made that both under the Prime Directive, i.e. General Order 1 and General Order 4, that the Federation is still controlling the destiny of a lesser developed society. And the aspect of withholding much needed who knows what. So perhaps had the version of Star Trek's Federation showed up in Earth just prior to World War II breaking out, that could have been diverted. Perhaps if they'd arrived during the time of the Middle Ages when the bubonic plague was ravaging the planet and took 40% of the population, if they'd have been able to introduce a cure for it, directly or indirectly, they would still be altering the development of the planet, but they would have been saving a lot of people's lives. So the argument can be made it's really hard to step back and keep your hands behind your back and observe a local population destroy itself, because you're going to uphold General Order 1 and General Order 4. General Order 4 specifically, is not to allow anybody to know that there are space-capable entities out there and other races more advanced than the people on the planet. And a double-edged blade there, because in some aspects it could be that General Order 4 actually protects an away team from undue potential harm, because if there's any if the aliens capture a Federation personnel impersonating locals, they might mistake them from another part of the planet and treat them as if they're enemy combatants or somebody from another part of the planet. But if they have any inclination that these are aliens and they're from an out, just ask yourself what we do. What would Earth do? What would humanity do? What would certain elements within humanity do? Now, it doesn't take much to know what we would do. We are, once again, our social media, our entertainment, and our history is full of it. We would, if we did capture aliens in the 1950s, dead or alive, we most certainly chopped them into bits and pieces, took them apart to discover how they function. More importantly, how closer they are to functioning the way we do. Can we learn anything from it? And if push comes to shove, can we kill them? is it possible for us to defend ourselves against this entity? And the same with their technology. We would be desperate to re-engineer their technology. Now, that said, this is, would I personally, do I believe any of that? I believe that there's a lot of things we don't know about, and it's our human arrogance that believes that we know everything about everything that there's ever to know. I had once had an argument. I've had this argument actually several times with some people about 0%, in the way of temperature. There's absolute zero, and I argue that absolute zero is not as absolute as you think it might be, because it's as absolute as we're able to determine and detect. Exact zero is exact zero, but what if there's another element involved here that we're not familiar with? So there might be a different element, such as dimension, to take place. So it might be absolute, but then there's an extra level of measuring, ability to be measured at some point in the future, once we get the technology that allows us to measure even more absolute zero. So in this aspect, I think if there's a good possibility that the government did encounter something, whether they're from another planet or from another dimension or from our future or our past, is yet to be determined. Have they acquired these extraterrestrial vessels? I believe that there's evidence of it. I actually have some personal evidence. I guess it's not evidence. I have a person in my family who has an eclectic memory, served in the military and in the Department of the Diplomatic Corps. She graduated with a high degree by the time she was 16. She was in the service at 18. She went to a special school sponsored by the Air Force. She spent her career going places and doing things that a lot of people don't do. And part of it is that she doesn't talk about most of it. She doesn't watch television. She doesn't read newspapers. She's not even a big fan of reading books, or for the sake of reading books, because everything she reads, she remembers. Everything she sees, she remembers. When her mother was sick in the hospital, she didn't go see her mother because she didn't want to relive that over and over and over. She is married somebody similar to her from Hawaii, and that allowed them to get better benefits from the military when they were in service. Now they live here in the West Side and cannot travel outside the country without getting special visas from the Department of something or another, because of what they still know in their head. Anyway, my cousins and I were having a debate one Christmas at my grandparents' house over Roswell in Area 51, and she came in and caught part of the tail end of it, and just carte blanche, which was unusual for her, said, you would be shocked a bit to know how close to the truth you are, and yet probably just as shocked as how far from the truth you are, and walked away. And it's always bothered me, and she's refused to ever go into any kind of discussion or details with it, because that's not how she works. She's kind of known for having these weird input pieces and then wandering off and then refusing to do one thing or another. So she might have just done that to keep us debating each other, or she might have known some truth. And the possibility of that she has maybe been to some of these secret or super secret government facilities or involved with some people who have, wouldn't surprise me. But that's neither here nor here. So general order number 4. Don't let the lesser people know you have technology they don't have. And you get yourself in trouble with the Federation if you do. So, there you go. Till the next one. It's the Fat Man saying, have yourself a good day.